Okay. Warren, this is our first day with our new book. We're doing Light of the Soul, which is also the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. And it is said by DK to be an important bridging book. This has commentary in it. And I think it's a logical next book before we move on into some of the other stuff. I'm looking forward to this. I had gotten to the point where it had said, the disciple should have studied and read the New Testament, the Bhagavad Gita, and the Yoga Sutras. And I had not studied the Yoga Sutras anywhere near, and I don't think I've actually read all of them. I've listened to them, but I think it's important that we get this down and we have something we can reference to come back to. So this seems like the right choice right now. So we're going to start with the introductory remarks today, and yeah, this is going to be interesting. For certain, it's going to be interesting because of the how the connotation of yoga has been mixed around, I guess you could say, how yoga is viewed today. So this is going to clear some things up and help us for sure. All right, the science of Raja Yoga, or the kingly science of the soul, as laid down by its main exponent, Patanjali, will eventually find its greatest demonstration in the West. And I'm sure we did not realize that unless you've studied this heavily, and then you probably aren't listening to us talk about this right now. This is owing to the fact that under cyclic law, the fifth root race and its fifth subrace must inevitably touch its highest point. That point in the economy of the races is seen exemplified in the right use of the mind and its utilization by the soul for the achievement of group objectives and the development of group consciousness upon the physical plane. And we know that the mental plane is the fifth plane from the top down. If we're looking from the top down on the constitution of man chart. All right. Hitherto, the mind has either been prostituted to material ends or has been deified. Through the science of Raja Yoga, the mind will be known as the instrument of the soul and the means whereby the brain of the aspirant becomes illuminated and knowledge gained of those matters which concern the realm of the soul. Under the law of evolution, likewise, the mind being the fifth principle, the fifth root race must be intimately concerned with it, and its corresponding fifth subrace more intimately than any other. Students would do well to bear in mind the following correspondences. 1, the fifth root race is the Aryan, the fifth subrace, the Anglo-Saxon, the fifth principle is that of mind, the fifth plane is the mental, and the fifth ray is of concrete knowledge. Lots of, it's interesting stuff here. All the various yogas have had their place in the unfoldment of the human being. In the first purely physical race, which is called the Lemurian, the yoga at the time imposed upon infant humanity was Hatha Yoga, the yoga of the physical body, that yoga which brings into conscious use and manipulation the various organs, muscles, and parts of the physical frame. The problem before the adepts of that time was to teach human beings, who were then little more than animals, the purpose, significance, and use of their various organs, so that they could consciously control them and the meaning of the symbol of the human figure. Therefore, in those early days, through the practice of Hatha Yoga, the human being reached the portal of initiation. At that time, the attainment of the third initiation, resulting in the transfiguration of the personality, was the highest initiation that man was capable of achieving. And I believe you can see, this was that was the third root race. And then the highest initiation was the third initiation. In Atlantean days, the progress of the sons of men was procured through the imposition of two yogas. First, the yoga which is called by the name of Laya Yoga, the yoga of the centers, which produced a stabilizing of the etheric body and of the centers in man and the development of the astral and physical psychic nature. Later on, Bhakti Yoga, growing out of the development of the emotional or astral body, was incorporated with Laya Yoga, and the foundation of that mysticism and devotion, which has been the underlying incentive during our particular Aryan root race, was laid. The fourth initiation was at that time the objective. The subject of these great initiations has been discussed more at length in my previous volume, Initiation Human and Solar. Now, in the Aryan race, the subjugation of the mental body and the control of the mind is brought about through the practice of Raja Yoga, and the fifth initiation, that of adept, is the goal for evolving humanity. Thus, all the yogas have had their place and served a useful purpose, and it will become apparent that any return to Hatha Yoga practices, or those practices which deal specifically with the development of the centers, brought about through various types of meditation practices and breathing exercises, is, from a certain aspect, a retrogression. Now, that may not, and look, pretty much, many of the practices, going back to many of the practices that were from old, is a retrogression, right? We are staying at the forefront of evolution at this point. We're the pioneers, no matter what others do, right? It's not to say we go telling people that what they're doing is involutionary or something. It's just not, for those on this path who recognize what we're talking about here. It will be found that through the practice of Raja Yoga, and through assuming that point of directional control, which is to be found by the man who centers his consciousness in the soul, the other forms of yoga are unnecessary, for the greater yoga automatically includes all the lesser in its results, though not in its practices. And this is the same for the teachings of the teaching of the ageless wisdom. All is included. And if you look at theosophy, even theosophy, the Theosophical system, they include, it's the synthesis of science, religion, and philosophy. I don't know if there's an order to that or not, but it doesn't, but regardless, the most advanced teachings will be a synthesis. So when these are studied, it will become apparent why the day of opportunity has only just arrived. The East has preserved rules for us since time immemorial. Here and there, Orientals, with a few Western adepts, have availed themselves of those rules and have submitted to the discipline of this exacting science. Thus has been preserved for us thus has been preserved for the race the continuity of the secret doctrine of the ageless wisdom, and thus has been gathered together the personnel of the hierarchy of our planet. In the time of the Buddha, and through the stimulation he produced, there was a great gathering in of arhats. Okay, sorry about that. I had to take another break. It is Saturday, and I got a late start today, and not everybody knows what I'm doing. So in the time of the Buddha, and through the stimulation he produced, there was a great gathering of arhats. These are men who had achieved liberation through self-initiated effort. This period in our Aryan race marked a climax for the East. Since then, the tide of spiritual life has steadily flowed westward. We may now look for a corresponding climax in the West, which will reach its zenith between the years 1965 and 2025. Towards this end, the adepts of the East and of the West are unitedly working, for they follow always the law. This is a very interesting statement. It says between the years. Let's just keep going. We'll see what comes out of this, right? But there's also, I think it was said that the Buddha had 9,000 arhats, or is it that Christ who had 9,000 arhats? I'm not sure. One or the other, though. This coming impulse, as was that in the time of the Buddha, a second-rate impulse, and has no relation to any first-rate impulse, such as that which brought forth H.P. Blavatsky. Let me go back to this 1965 to 2025 thing. Now, if we talk to Carla about this, she would be able to explain this really well, that how in around 66, there was a great energy that came down and kind of transformed things on the physical plane, and it really threw a wrench in the whole thing going on down here, because you saw like the hippie movement and the lots of drugs and love, and there was a real awakening, spiritual awakening during that time. And the second ray expression can be expressed, in a strange way, through sex, you want to say, on the physical plane, through that impulse. It's these abstractions. So yeah, I mean, we see these things, and it certainly is the case. All right. So, but this coming impulse, as was that in the time of the Buddha, a second-rate impulse. Now we're referring to second ray, this coming impulse would be between 65 and 2025, right? It has no relation to any first-rate impulse, such as that which brought forth H.P. Blavatsky. First-rate impulses rise in the first quarter of each century and reach their climax on the physical plane during the last quarter. The interest now shown in Raja Yoga and the study of this science and the rules it provides for man's unfoldment is indicative of the general trend of this rising second-rate impulse. This interest will be increasingly shown. Thus comes the day of opportunity. There are 3 books which should be in the hands of every student: the Bhagavad Gita, the New Testament, and the Yoga Sutras. For in these three is contained a complete picture of the soul and its unfoldment. And this is why we're reading this book right now, honestly. When I read this and I saw how important this is, I figured then we better get on it, essentially, right? But in the Gita, we have given us, in its 18 chapters, a description of the soul of Krishna, the second aspect, and his true nature as God in manifestation, culminating in that marvelous chapter where he reveals himself to Arjuna, the aspirant, as the soul of all things and the point of glory behind the veil of every form. In the New Testament, there is depicted for us the life of a Son of God in full manifestation, wherein, freed from every veil, the soul in its true nature walks the earth. It becomes apparent to us as we study the life of Christ what it means to develop the powers of the soul to attain liberation and become in full glory a God walking on earth. In the Yoga Sutras, there are embodied for us the laws of that becoming, and the rule. In the Yoga Sutras, there are embodied for us the laws of that becoming and the rules, methods, and means which, when followed, make a man perfect even as your Father in heaven is perfect. Step by step, there is unfolded for us a graded system of development, leading a man from the stage of average good man through those of aspirant, initiate, and master onto that exalted point in evolution at which the Christ now stands. John, the beloved disciple, has said that we shall be like him, for we shall see him as he is. And the revelation of the soul to man in physical plane incarnation works ever the great transformation. Christ himself has said that greater works than I do shall ye do, holding out to us the promise of the kingdom, the power, and the glory, provided our aspiration and endurance suffice to carry us along the thorny way of the cross and enable us to tread that path which leads uphill all the way to the summit of the Mount of Transfiguration. How is this great change brought about? How does man, the victim of his desires and lower nature, become man, the victor, triumph over the world, the flesh, and the devil? It is brought about when the physical brain of the incarnated man becomes aware of the self, the soul, and this conscious awareness only becomes possible when the true self can reflect itself in the mind stuff. The soul is inherently freed from objects and stands ever in the state of isolated unity. Man, however, in incarnation has to arrive in his physical brain consciousness at a realization of these two states of being. He has consciously to free himself from all objects of desire and stand as a unified whole, detached and liberated from all veils, from all forms in the three worlds. When the state of conscious being, as known by the spiritual man, becomes also the condition of awareness of the man in physical incarnation, then the goal has been reached. Wow, that's a heavy statement there, right? That's definitely worthy of deeper contemplation there. Let's read it again. When the state of conscious being, as known by the spiritual man, becomes also the condition of awareness of the man in physical incarnation, then the goal has been reached. That would be, this is something maybe you get a glimpse of. Maybe we get a glimpse of this, that pure, unbelievable clarity of sorts once in a while. But to have that, in a full-time awareness, that's the goal. And definitely, the prize that we're running the race for. And, we run the race to win, like Paul says, right? And that's what ultimately would really is really pushing people forward here too, pushing us forward, pushing all of us forward. It just takes a glimpse, right? The man is no longer what his physical body makes him. When identified with it, the man is no longer what his physical body makes him. When identified with it, the victim of the world. He walks free, with shining face, and the light of his countenance is shed abroad upon all he meets. No longer do his desires swing the flesh into activity, and no longer does his astral body subjugate him and overcome him. Through dispassion and the balancing of the pairs of opposites, he has freed himself from the moods, feelings, longings, desires, and emotional reactions which characterize the life of the average man, and has arrived at the point of peace. The devil of pride, the personification of the misused mental nature and the distorted perception of the mind, are overcome, and he stands liberated from the three worlds. And that's what it means to stand on top of the mountain. Is to stand over the three worlds. Right? Just as, after the second initiation, you walk on, you get pulled out of the water, or you walk on water, over the waters, over the astral plane. And then it seems at the third initiation, you walk, you're over the three worlds. You stand liberated from the three worlds. The nature of the soul, the qualities and activities inherent in the love nature of the Son of God, and the wisdom which demonstrates when love and activity are brought together, characterized his life on earth, and he can say, as did the Christ, it is finished. So let's not skip this, because this is important. It does help us build in the understanding of the aspects, the wisdom which demonstrates when love and activity, the second and third aspects, are brought together, characterize his life on earth, and he can say, as did the Christ, it is finished. And the first aspect, remember, being will. So the date of the birth of Patanjali is unknown, and there is a good deal of controversy upon this matter. Most of the Occidental authorities ascribe a date between the years 820 BC to 300 BC, though one or two place him after Christ. The Hindu authorities themselves, however, who may be supposed to know something about the matter, ascribe a very much earlier date, even as far back as 10,000 BC. Patanjali was a compiler of teaching which, up to the time of his advent, had been given orally for many centuries. He was the first to reduce the teaching to writing for the use of students, and hence he is regarded as the founder of the Raja Yoga school. The system, however, has been in use since the very beginning of the Aryan race. The Yoga Sutras are the basic teaching of the Trans-Himalayan school, to which many of the masters of the wisdom belong, and many students hold that the Essenes and other schools of mystical training and thought closely connected with the founder of Christianity and the early Christians are based upon the same system, and that their teachers were trained in the great Trans-Himalayan school. That would make perfect sense, right? As we get through this, that would make perfect sense as this is all brought together. It should be stated here that the sutras have been dictated and paraphrased by the Tibetan brother, and the commentary upon them has been written by myself and subjected to revision and comment by the Tibetan, who is Master DK, Master Dwakul. So we're getting this commentary at this point by a master. It should be noted that the translation is not literal and is not an exact definition of each original Sanskrit term. It is an attempt to put into clear and understandable English the exact meaning, insofar it is possible to do so through the medium of that non-elastic and unimaginative tongue, which is what we're supposed to do with all of these books, always bringing them into a more modern translation. The student may find it of use in the study of these sutras to compare the rendition here given with the various other procurable translations. That was written by Alice Bailey. All right, here we go. And here's what our topical outline looks like and what we're going to cover. The problem of union, the steps to union, union achieved and its results, and illumination in the fourth book. Okay, here's some of the translations used in the present work, and we should all probably recognize these. I would say this is one of the ones that we see most often here. I think I have a copy of this. I think Charles Johnson even probably did the Bhagavad Gita as well, I want to say. All right, so we're going to call this the introduction to light of the soul, and this will be short, but know that we are going to get into the Yoga Sutras in book 1 come Monday. All right, so this is exciting. We're getting into a new book, and certainly this is going to be very deep, and it's going to get our mind moving quite a bit by the time as we get through this, to say the absolute least. So I'm excited. Okay, very good. See you soon. Tomorrow is Treatise on White Magic, Sunday. Thanks. Have a good one.